Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining me today. My name's Gillian Rouge and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator. So a couple of weeks ago I made these 3 cards that you see right here. In fact, I made the one on top called using the Beach Day bundle, and it was very well received. I thank you so much to everyone that watched and commented on my video. And anyway, I asked near the end if any of you would be interested in seeing how to make the Zinnia card, as that was a little bit different from the other two. So the two that I'm showing you right now, I stamped and coloured and die cut most of the little pieces, and then I attached them to the die cut rectangles afterwards. But this Zinnia one, I stamped all the images onto the die cut pieces, and so the process was a little bit different. So I'm going to show you how to make this card today. I'm not going to go over all the from start to finish how to make the masks, but I will link to my original video so that you can go watch that, and then it'll all make sense how I did that. So for right now, I'm just going to focus on making this card. So I'm going to be using, let me show you, the Perennial Postage Dies, and then also the Simply Zinnia stamp set. This is an online exclusive stamp set, so you can own, it's not in any catalogs. So I have gone ahead and die cut the pieces that I need for the card front. Basically, I need five of the different Perennial Postage dies, 2 squares, and then 3 of the rectangles. And I will put the dimensions of all the dies that I used in the video description so you can see, but I'm just kind of pointing out which ones here. And then I'm going to bring in the masks that I've already made, that I have used on the previous cards. And as I said, I'm not going to show you how to make these from scratch, but I will link to the video in the video description so that you can go ahead and watch. But I'll just go over briefly how I made them. So the idea was I wanted to find a way to create that white border around the edge of the images like a real postage stamp. So what I did is I used strips of Scotch tape and I put them around the edge of each of the negative dies to create a mask. And I don't know if you can see it, I'm showing you there. And it works better than masking paper or washi tape because it's clear, so you can see exactly how much gap you're leaving. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting the pieces that are die cut, I've flipped over the negative, the mask, and I'm just putting them in like little puzzle pieces. And I'm just showing you here, these are the masks that I previously made and I've used a number of times. So the nice thing is that you can reuse these over and over. Although Scotch tape is sticky, there's only a little bit that's actually sticks to the die cut pieces, but it's just sticky enough to hold them in place. So I'm doing the same with the other 2 pieces. I flipped over the mask and I'm just fitting them in, again, like little puzzle pieces. And this is the last one going in here. And this one I had a little trouble with. I'm flipping it around to see, it should be symmetrical, but it didn't seem to want to go in. So I'm just filling it with a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'll turn the pieces back over so they're right side up, and I'll just go ahead and kind of rub around with my fingers just to make sure that Scotch tape is sticking to the cardstock. And I'm still fiddling with that one there as it doesn't seem to want to fit in quite right. And in fact, there was a little tiny piece of something that was stuck to the Scotch tape there. So I'm just taking that out and then it seems to fit in better. But you can keep these in with your dies, these masks, or your stamps and reuse them multiple times. So normally at this point I would go ahead and do the sponging, but I'm actually going to do the stamping first on these cards. So I'm just bringing back in the card to show you what I'm going to be stamping on each piece. So the sentiment's going to go in that piece on the top right, and then the 2 square pieces will have portions of the large flower, the large image. It's small flowers, but it's the large image. and then that large piece that I'm just pointing to has the larger flower and the leaves. So I'm just bringing in all my stamps here. And there's the sentiment that's going to go in the top right, and then this is the large image that I was just talking about. And because I'm not going to be using the whole image, I didn't bother pulling out my big block. I just put it on a I forget what size that is, but I just put it on that block because really I'm only going to be stamping up the top part of that image. So here I am just gathering all my stamps, and I'm going to do my sentiment first. And what I like to do sometimes, if it's a red rubber stamp especially, is to just test out to see if the stamp does stamp straight. Sometimes that sticky that goes on the stamp itself does not line up with the actual stamp. So what I'm doing here is I'm just doing a little practice run on my glass mat. The glass mat is really great for this because you can just wipe it off. It look pretty straight, so I'm comfortable that that it's going to be straight when I stamp it onto my die cut piece here. So I'm just going ahead and doing that, and hopefully it'll be straight. Here goes. All right. Hold it down for a couple of seconds. Yeah, it looks good. So that's the sentiment done. So now I can move on to the other flowers. So the squares are just going to have a portion of that large stamp there. So I'm just kind of inking up. I really just need those top flowers. So I'm going ahead and stamping that onto the small square. And you can see now why it's handy to have these dies, the way I've done the die cut them and created these masks. I've kind of spaced them out a little bit so that if you do have a large stamp, you don't have to worry about stamping over one of the others. And there's room when you're sponging too, to not, if you're doing different colors on different pieces, to not get them in the way. So one tip I have for you is to, if you're planning a card like this, is to cut some pieces, some die cut pieces from copy paper. You can cut several layers at once because it's so thin, and then you can play around with the layout with those. So that's what I was just showing you there before you stamp on your basic white cardstock. So now I'm just stamping that other square die cut, the slightly larger one with the little group of flowers, and putting that to the one side. And that little one there doesn't get any stamping on it. It wasn't really a good stamp to go in there, and I ended up just putting in a couple of little hearts there instead. So now I just need to stamp that larger flower, and I'm going to do some masking on this too because I want the leaves to show from underneath, and I'm just showing you that one side of the stamp, the leaves look a little bit bigger, the petals, sorry. So I'm kind of stamping it with the bigger petals at the bottom. And I'll put that to one. Oh, here's my masking tape paper, Stampin' Up masking paper. So I'm just going to take a piece of this and restamp the flower. And then, because I want the leaf to look like it's coming out from underneath the flower, so I need to mask off the flower. You'd think that you'd need to stamp the background stamp first, but in fact, when you're masking, you need to stamp the image that's in the foreground first, and then the leaves second. So I've got that stamped, but while I had my ink out, I thought before I cut out that image that I would just go ahead and stamp the inside of the card. So I've just got the sentiment and the small flowers again to go on that. So here's what I have inside, just the sentiment and the image. And I'm going to do a practice again of the sentiment. This one I actually haven't even stuck the backing onto the stamp, but that came out pretty straight too. So I can go ahead and stamp that onto my piece of basic white. And this basic white is the same size that's going to go on the front. It's 5 by 3 3/4. So that's the sentiment, and I'll just put the flower, again just inking up a little bit of the flower and putting that, sorry I was a bit off camera there, just wiping off my glass mat. Then I can come back, bring my masking paper back in, and I'll go ahead and cut this out. Now I'm kind of looking, I don't actually need to cut out the whole flower because the leaf is just going to get stamped off to the bottom right there. So I'm just kind of looking to see which area I need to cut, because there's no point cutting the whole thing out if you don't need to. And I can keep this and maybe use it another time, and if I do need to trim off the rest, I always can. So here I'm just using my little snips, and I'm kind of holding my snips still and moving the paper around, which makes it a little easier to cut. And I'm going to speed up some of this so you don't have to watch it all in real time. And I'm just checking to see, I decided I need to just cut a little bit more. Sorry, I'm off the bottom there a little bit. And I'm actually cutting very slightly inside that black line, the black outline of the flower, so that when I stamp my leaf, there won't be any gap between the edge of the flower and the leaf. So that's all done. I'm just making sure that it's going to line up properly. Then I'm going to take the backing off, just flick it a few times with your fingernail and hopefully it'll come off. And then off camera, what you're not seeing is our masking paper is super sticky. So I'm just tapping it on my t-shirt a couple of times to get a little bit of the sticky off. And then I'm just lining it up there, and I'm not pushing it down reasonably well, but not super firmly, so that I can make sure I can peel it off again, okay? And then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the leaf on that bottom right there. I'm going to overlap it over the flower so that it looks, when the mask is removed, it looks like it's coming out from underneath. So I'm just overlapping it a little bit. I could have gone a little bit further actually, I think I did with the other card. And then I will remove the masking paper carefully, and I'm kind of pulling it back on itself slowly so I don't tear the paper. And this came off just fine. And there we go, it looks like the leaf is coming out from under the flower. So now all my stamping is done. And now this is a very important part here. We need to wipe off that black that is still on the Scotch tape. Now, if there's black ink on the actual basic white cardstock mask, that probably will have dried. But if it's on the Scotch tape, it's going to lay on the surface. So you can see I just started to wipe off a little bit with a dry cloth, and then I spritzed a little bit of water on it, and then I decided actually to pop out the images in case I smudged black ink onto them. So I don't have to worry about the sentiment because there's no ink around that, but I'm just wiping down all that Scotch tape to make sure that the black ink is all gone, because the next step is going to be sponging with a lighter colored ink. And if you pick up some of that black onto your blending brush, you're going to have a smudgy mess over your lovely stamped images, and you won't be happy. So and I did that. Speaking from experience, the first time I made this card, that's what I did. I picked up some of the black on my blue brush and smudged it across my image, and I wasn't very happy. So this is a really important step. Make sure you just wipe all that off, and you should be good to go. Then when I've done that, I'm not going to worry about that little one, obviously. Then I'm just popping all the pieces back in. And then I can do my colouring. Oh, my sponging. Sorry, not my colouring. Colouring comes next. So there we go. So I'm going to be using Balmy Blue ink for my sponging. So I'm just going to grab that and get that ready. And then I'm using a small blending brush, which worked well for this because of the images. And I'm just showing that I had it kind of a little uneven. I didn't have a really even coverage over everything, which I kind of liked. And I'm starting on the sentiment. And you just want to make sure that you've used a dye ink that is completely dry here. You don't want to use a pigment ink that will smudge. So I used our black memento ink that dries really well. You can definitely do the sponging first and then stamp. But on the flowers, I wanted to stamp my flowers first so I could sponge mostly around them. You'll see I will get some ink on the flowers, which I'm not too concerned about because I am going to be colouring them with darker inks. But I didn't want to do the whole area with a fairly good layer of ink and then come in and stamp afterwards. So that's why I decided to stamp first, and I didn't have any problems with the ink smudging. So that's the first one. Now I'm moving on to this square with the flowers. And as I said, I'm not going to deliberately sponge in the flowers. I'm going to kind of work around them as best I can, but I'm not worried if some of a little ink gets onto the stamped images because, as I said, I'm going to be coming in with some dark colours, and any ink that I do got in those images will be hopefully covered up just fine. So being a little bit careful, but I'm not, worrying too much. You'll see I do get some ink on the flowers. So that's the second one done, and then I will speed up while I get the rest of the sponge. That little one didn't have any stamping on, so that was easy. And then like I say, I'm just speeding up so you don't have to watch in real time me going around this other little one. And then the large one. The large one was a little bit easier to do because of that big image. It was quite easy to not get too much ink on there. So I'll just come in and finish that. Okay, so that is all the sponging done. And then the next thing is the colouring. And I decided to leave, you could definitely pop all the pieces out again and colour them and put them back in. I decided I want to do some splattering after I've done the colouring. So like I say, you could definitely take them out and put them back in again, but I decided to leave them in there while I did the colouring, and then I'll do the splattering afterwards. I don't want the splattering to get onto the white edges. So I'm just bringing in my blends. So I'm using Cherry Cobbler Light and Dark, and then I've got Dark Melon Mumbo also. For the leaves, I've got Granny Apple Green Light and Dark, and then for the little centres of the flowers, I'm not sure what they're called, but I've got Lemon Lolly Dark. And I'm going to go ahead and do those first, those little yellow parts of the flower, so that I can see where not to colour with my Cherry Cobbler. So I'm just kind of filling those in, and I'll actually go back in at the end and do them again just to make them pop a little bit more, a little bit darker. Lemon Lolly is quite a light colour, even the dark, so I'll just go back in a little bit later and do them one more time. Then I'm grabbing my Cherry Cobbler Dark, and I'm using the pen tip, I forget what you call that, the pen tip I think, and I'm just doing some little flicking motions with that. I'm kind of following a little bit the lines on the stamp and just doing a little bit of flicking there, and then those petals at the very back, those little edges that are sticking out, I'm just kind of colouring them in dark too, and just not doing any crazy colouring. I enjoy colouring, but I don't know that I'm that good at it necessarily, so I'm just kind of doing what I think. So again, I'm just kind of flicking on those little lines on the petals and filling in the little dark areas all around. And I did draw kind of a little line along the edge of the Scotch tape there. And then I'm coming in with my light Cherry Cobbler, and I'm using the brush tip this time, and I'm just blending all that out and filling everything in. And then you'll see I did come in at the end with Melon Mambo Dark. I wanted a little bit more contrast, a little bit more of a kind of richer colour in the centre. So you'll see when I finish that I'm grabbing my Melon Mambo Dark, the brush tip end, and I'm just going to add, I just felt like it gave a little bit more dimension, a little bit more richness to the flower. And then, as you see, I'm just coming back in again with that Lemon Lolly. Then the leaves, I came in with Granny Apple Green Dark, and then just blended out with the light. And you see it covers up the Balmy Blue pretty well. Anyway, I went ahead off camera and coloured in all the others. So the next thing that I did after filling in this little part that I forgot was I added some splatters using a black blender pen. And unfortunately, I did not have my phone on Do Not Disturb, and I was in a text group, and everyone in the group started texting, and all the text messages were popping up on my screen. So unfortunately, I had to delete that, but you will see I did some black splatters by tapping one blender pen on another, and you'll see in a little bit that, especially if you look at where the sentiment is, that I do have some black splatters, and that's why I left them in the mask for now. So here you can see I've taken the individual images out of the mask, and I've got a card base here that is 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, and then I've got a matte layer that is 3.5 by 5 inches, thick wide cardstock for the card base and regular for the matte layer. And here I'm just got the inside piece, and that's the same size as the white piece on the front. And then this is Balmy Blue, and this is 5 1/4 by 4. So I'm just adhering these together, and they'll go on the inside of the card. And I like to have that extra piece of Balmy Blue. I think it adds something to the inside as the card base is white. And it also adds some extra weight to the back of the card so that it's a similar weight to the front. So I kind of like how that works out. So then this matte layer on the front, I'm going to attach with dimensionals. Because it's the same color, if I just stick it down with regular adhesive, it kind of gets lost a little bit. So putting on some dimensionals on the back will pop it up and make it a little bit more visible. So just popping a few dimensionals on the back here. And obviously you can put your images on this layer first and then attach it to the card base if you prefer to do it that way. Either way is fine. All right, so then it's just a matter of attaching the different die cuts with the images to the card base. And it did take me a little while when I did the first card to figure out which dies would work to fit on a card base and how to arrange them. But so I've done all the work for you. And again, I'm going to pop these up with dimensionals. If you want, you can just put them on flat, but I did like, again, because it's kind of white on white, I thought it would be more obvious if it would look nicer if I put dimensionals on. So just putting these, and I'm going to start with that largest flower that's in the bottom left. Put that one on first, and I'm basically just copying. I'm kind of looking at my sample there, my original, and seeing how I laid them out, how much gap I left. If you're doing this though, I would maybe lay them for the first time, maybe lay them all out on the matte layer first to get an idea of how much gap you need to leave around all of them. They don't quite match up. You can see that square in the bottom right is not quite the same height as the rectangle that I'm putting on right now. So they're not quite designed to all go together like this necessarily, but I think it works. And again, the flower that I'm putting on the wrong way, I wanted to have that turned so the flower's going out to the right, but never mind. And here's the sentiment, and you can see here the splatters, they show up quite well on here. And again, I apologize about not being able to show that. I'll make sure my phone's on Do Not Disturb next time. And then I'm just working, I put the two outside pieces first, and then I can center that little one in the middle. And you can see some splatters. You can see a few of the splatters. If you don't want to do that step, obviously you don't have to either. I just thought it added a little something. All right, so the card's almost finished. Now I'm going to add some little hearts to that little tiny rectangle there and on the bottom of the sentiment. These hearts are cut from Cherry Cobbler cardstock, and I actually die cut them from the Friends for Life dies that are in the annual catalogue. And what's nice is it cuts 2 little hearts at one time. But obviously use whatever heart dies or punch you may have here. And I'm just sticking them on with some glue dots. If I can get it off my fingernail. So I've got putting 2 on that little rectangle. And then I'm going to put 1 on the sentiment. Right there, and then I thought I would just make them a little sparkly with some Wink of Stella. So just putting a little bit of that on. And then the last thing is to add some embellishments. And these are called, that I'm adding here, these are called adhesive backed sparkle gems, and again they're in the annual catalogue. And I used black on the first card, but I'm just looking to see what might, if I want to use black again. And I decided actually to go with the kind of clear, silvery ones, just for a change. And then I can see which I like best. You can let me know which you like best. So that's about it. And there, the card is finished. So this one that I just made turned out a little darker than the first one, but obviously no 2 are ever going to be the same. So I'm just bringing back in the other cards that I made. So here's the Beach Day card that I made in the first video, and then the other one is using the Attention Shoppers bundle. I will list all the products I used in today's video in the description below, and I will have links for all of them. It links to my store for all of them. If you don't have a demonstrator, I would love it if you would purchase some of these products from me and have a go at making these cards. And of course, please go ahead and like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more from me. Thank you again for watching. I appreciate you all so much. Thanks again. See you soon.